Traveling as an LGBTQ+ individual presents unique challenges and experiences, ranging from navigating different cultural attitudes to ensuring personal safety in unfamiliar environments. In a world where LGBTQ+ rights are still a work in progress in many countries, understanding how to adapt to the local culture while staying true to oneself is essential. Over the years, my travels have taught me the importance of preparation, awareness, and building connections within the local LGBTQ+ community. From reading social signals and adjusting behavior to finding safe spaces and traveling with a trusted companion, these experiences have shaped how I travel and view the world. Let me take you through some of the lessons I've learned along the way. When I first started planning my trip, one of the most important things I did was research my destinations in depth. The idea was not just to explore new places, but to also understand the local culture, laws, and attitudes towards LGBTQ+ individuals. Traveling safely as a member of the LGBTQ+ community requires more than just knowing the best tourist spots. It's about understanding where you'll feel accepted and where you might need to exercise caution. Let me share a few more personal experiences that helped shape how I prepared for this journey. Before I even packed my bags, I spent hours reading blogs, watching YouTube videos, and talking to other LGBTQ+ travelers who had been to the places I planned to visit. One story that stuck with me was from a fellow traveler who had gone to a relatively conservative country in the Middle East. He spoke about how, while the country's capital was fairly cosmopolitan and somewhat liberal in its approach to LGBTQ+ rights, smaller towns were much more traditional and had a deeply rooted conservative mindset. He shared how, in one town, he and his partner accidentally made the mistake of holding hands in public, and they were immediately met with a glare from a passerby that caused them both to feel uncomfortable for the rest of the day. The experience taught me that even in countries where there might be legal protection for LGBTQ+ individuals, the social atmosphere can vary drastically from one place to another. This story made me realize that I needed to carefully consider not only the country as a whole, but also the specific cities and regions I was visiting. So, I made sure to focus on places that had a strong LGBTQ+ presence. Cities like Bangkok, where you'll find vibrant LGBTQ+ nightlife and pride events, or even areas like Bali, which are known for being LGBTQ friendly, due to their progressive attitudes toward tourism and openness. A key takeaway from this research was that no matter where you are, there are always places where LGBTQ+ individuals are more welcome. For example, I learned that Vietnam, although a country with conservative roots, has one of the fastest-growing LGBTQ+ communities in Southeast Asia. Places like Ho Chi Minh City are known for their inclusive atmosphere, with underground queer events, cafes, and even LGBTQ+ friendly bars. But this isn't the case everywhere. In smaller towns or rural areas you may not find as much openness, so it's important to be aware of your surroundings and know when and where it's safe to express yourself freely. Another key aspect of my planning was understanding the local laws. I remember reading about a country in South Asia where same-sex relations are illegal, but the law isn't strictly enforced. The country may have decriminalized homosexuality in recent years, but there are still pockets of deep homophobia, especially in rural areas. This made me think about how even if the law allows us to exist, public attitudes might not always follow suit. To be extra cautious, I took the time to plan ahead for potential tricky situations. For instance, if I went to a place where the atmosphere felt a bit tense, I made sure to have a strategy for keeping things low-key. For example, I read about a gay couple who had traveled to a more conservative part of Asia, where holding hands was simply not an option. The couple had to adjust their usual way of being affectionate by avoiding physical touch in public spaces, but would express their affection through small gestures like a wink or a smile when no one was looking. This gave me some useful insight into how I could maintain my sense of self while respecting the local customs. One thing I made sure to do was book accommodations that were well reviewed by LGBTQ plus travelers. Hotels or guest houses that are known for being LGBTQ plus friendly can offer a sense of safety and comfort. I was careful to choose places with positive reviews from travelers in the LGBTQ plus community, because I knew that being in an environment where the staff and locals are supportive could make a huge difference in how comfortable I felt. It's a good idea to read reviews on LGBTQ plus focused travel websites or check out apps like LGBTQ plus Travel or Pink Embassy to find recommendations. In one instance, I stayed in a guest house in the heart of Bangkok that was highly recommended by fellow travelers. The host was an openly LGBTQ plus woman, and she went out of her way to make sure I felt welcome, giving me tips on local LGBTQ plus events, and providing a discreet and safe environment to meet other LGBTQ plus travelers. She even introduced me to some local LGBTQ plus activists who were doing amazing work around LGBTQ plus rights. It was such a reassuring experience to be in a place where I could openly talk about my concerns, knowing I wasn't alone. But this wasn't always the case. In one country I had a different experience. The local people were polite but distant, and I quickly realized that certain public behaviors could be misconstrued, even if the law didn't prohibit them. This led me to always double-check how I was behaving in public. Small things like sitting too closely or making eye contact for too long could attract unwanted attention in certain places. There was one occasion where I unknowingly made a mistake by walking down a street a little too comfortably with a friend in the evening. A group of local men took notice of us, and we could feel the tension in the air. Thankfully, nothing escalated, but I quickly decided to switch up my route and keep the rest of the evening low-key. That was a reminder that while I wasn't doing anything illegal, my safety could depend on how well I blended into the local culture. Another key element of my preparation was understanding emergency protocols. I researched where the nearest embassy was and noted down emergency contacts. I also made sure I had a list of LGBTQ plus organizations or resources that could help me if I found myself in a situation where I needed support. Fortunately, I never had to use these resources, but knowing I had them in my back pocket gave me peace of mind. All of these experiences and stories helped shape my planning and made me realize how essential it is to be prepared, not just logistically but emotionally and culturally, when traveling as an LGBTQ plus individual. I wasn't just planning a trip, I was learning how to navigate a world that wasn't always designed for me, and finding my place within it. The more I prepared, the more confident I felt, knowing I had the knowledge and resources to handle any situation that came my way. When I first heard the term masking in the context of LGBTQ plus travel, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. It felt like something that went against everything I stood for, expressing myself authentically. But the more I traveled and learned about the cultural dynamics in different parts of the world, I came to understand that sometimes masking isn't just about hiding who you are. It's about protecting yourself in environments that might not be as welcoming or safe. One story that comes to mind is from my visit to a rural town in Southeast Asia. I had traveled to a large city where LGBTQ plus rights were somewhat accepted, But as I ventured deeper into smaller, less cosmopolitan areas, I realized the difference in attitudes. I was walking through a quiet street when I held my partner's hand, not thinking twice about it. We weren't being overly affectionate, just enjoying the peaceful walk and the beautiful surroundings. Suddenly, I noticed that the people around us, mainly older individuals, began staring at us. Their gazes weren't the casual kind of glance you give a stranger. They were intense, judgmental, and frankly uncomfortable. I felt the weight of their stares, and my partner noticed too. In that moment, I realized that we had stepped into an area where our behavior, which we considered normal, was seen as out of place. We quickly separated our hands and made the decision to move more discreetly through the town. That moment of discomfort made me reflect on the concept of masking. It wasn't about being ashamed of who I am or denying my identity, but rather making a quick, intuitive decision to avoid putting myself and my partner at risk in a place where people weren't ready to accept us. Another time I found myself masking occurred in a more progressive country, where LGBTQ+ rights were technically protected by law, but public opinion still had a long way to go. I had visited a major city known for its open-mindedness, but a few short days later, I traveled to a quieter, less visited part of the country. While I wasn't expecting a major cultural shock, I quickly learned that, in these more isolated areas, being openly LGBTQ+ was not exactly welcomed. I was attending a small local event and casually mentioned my partner in conversation. Almost immediately, the tone shifted. The smiles faded, and there was a brief, almost imperceptible pause in the conversation. The people around me weren't openly hostile, but their discomfort was palpable. I remember thinking, was it really necessary to mention that I was in a relationship with someone of the same gender? That small interaction gave me a deeper understanding of how masking works. It's not about pretending to be something you're not, but sometimes it's about gauging the room and deciding whether expressing yourself will lead to a more open and safe experience, or whether it will create unnecessary tension. So, I chose to hold back. I didn't feel forced to hide who I was, but I opted for a more subtle approach to avoid alienating myself or causing discomfort in an unfamiliar space. I found myself talking about other aspects of my life instead, my travels, my hobbies, and general topics that didn't bring my sexuality to the forefront. On another trip to a country where same-sex relationships are still criminalized, I had to be even more cautious. The country had progressive cities with thriving tourist areas, but when I ventured outside those safe zones, I felt the risks skyrocket. There was a moment when I made the decision to mask in the most unexpected way. I was staying at a guest house run by a friendly family, and after a long day of sightseeing, I decided to have a drink in the common area. I met a few other travelers. One of them was a fellow LGBTQ+ individual. We didn't explicitly talk about our identities, but it was clear that we had an understanding. However, as the conversation progressed, a few of the local staff members entered the room, and suddenly, the atmosphere changed. They began glancing at us every few seconds, whispering to each other in the local language. It was then that I realized how easily something could escalate. Despite the fact that we weren't doing anything wrong, being two people of the same sex having a casual conversation could be perceived as something much more offensive in that context. So we made the choice to wrap up our conversation and shift to safer topics. We didn't push boundaries, and we quietly retreated to our rooms. That night, I couldn't help but reflect on the fine line between authenticity and safety. In places like this where LGBTQ+ rights are non-existent and the law could easily be used against us, masking isn't just a choice, it's a necessity for survival. But it's also a balancing act. I didn't feel I had to deny who I am. I simply had to understand the situation and adjust my approach in a way that kept me and my fellow travelers out of harm's way. While masking is sometimes necessary, it can be emotionally exhausting. I've had moments when I felt like I was holding my breath, constantly second-guessing myself and the way I acted. It's frustrating to have to hide or downplay a part of who you are, especially when you're used to expressing yourself freely. However, I've learned that these moments are not a reflection of weakness, but a sign of resilience. It's about making the decision that keeps you safe in the moment without compromising your core values. The key, I've learned, is not to let masking consume you or define your experience. It's a tool to be used in specific circumstances, but it should never be the default. Over time, you build your own sense of what's appropriate, what feels safe, and when it's time to step out of the shadows and be yourself. One of the most empowering moments in my travels was when I finally reached a place where I could be open and true to myself without fear of consequence. It felt like a breath of fresh air. That moment was a reminder that even though masking is sometimes a necessary survival tactic, it's also temporary. No matter where I am in the world, I carry the hope that one day I won't need to hide anymore. The process of masking isn't easy, but in many ways, it's an essential part of the journey, one that helps us navigate the complexities of being an LGBTQ+ individual in a diverse world. The most important thing is that we don't lose sight of who we are and that we find moments of authenticity, even if they're rare. When those moments come, they're all the more precious. One of the most important strategies I adopted while traveling as an LGBTQ+ individual was always traveling with a companion or ensuring I had constant communication with someone back home. The security of knowing someone was aware of my whereabouts, the plans I had for the day, and the challenges I might be facing gave me a sense of confidence I couldn't have achieved on my own. Being with someone else doesn't just offer emotional support. It's a safety net in situations where navigating as a solo traveler might feel daunting or risky. The first time I traveled to a destination known for its conservative views on LGBTQ+ rights, I was anxious about how I would navigate the local attitudes toward same-sex couples. I decided to bring a close friend who was familiar with my experiences and supportive of my identity. It wasn't just about having someone to hang out with or share the journey. Having a trusted companion was a form of emotional armor. We could look out for each other, providing reassurances when things felt off or too risky. One night, as we ventured into a bustling night market in a city with a reputation for being more traditional, I felt a sense of unease as we passed through certain areas. The crowd was dense, and the stares from passers-by were sharp. I could sense the discomfort in the air. Having my friend by my side was such a relief. Just knowing that I wasn't alone in that situation made me feel stronger. We exchanged a quick glance and decided to keep walking together, silently understanding that it was safer to avoid drawing attention. The presence of a companion, especially one who shared the same understanding of safety and boundaries, created an unspoken bond of trust. There were moments during the trip when I found myself questioning whether I should be more cautious. Once, in a less LGBTQ+ friendly city, I found myself in a situation where people around us were openly whispering and staring. My partner at the time had grown more nervous, and I could see that her discomfort was becoming more noticeable. But we were together, and that made all the difference. The most empowering part of traveling with a companion is that you are not only looking out for yourself, but also supporting each other. In places where there is potential for hostility or discomfort, having someone with you acts as both a shield and a moral support system. In moments when you feel vulnerable, your companion can help you make the decision to adjust your behavior, change routes, or even leave a space if the situation feels unsafe. Even if I wasn't traveling with a partner or close friend, I always made sure to keep in contact with someone I trusted. While on my travels, I found that maintaining regular check-ins was essential, especially when exploring unfamiliar or potentially unsafe areas. I had a couple of friends who knew my itinerary, and I made it a habit to send them a message each evening to let them know where I was and what I was up to. One particular evening stands out. I had ventured out on my own to a smaller, more remote area of the country. I knew I wasn't in the heart of a city, but I was staying in a guest house that had a few other tourists. That evening I went for a walk down a quiet street, hoping to clear my mind after a busy day. As I walked, I realized I was becoming increasingly isolated from others. My phone wasn't working well in this area, and there weren't any other tourists around. I could feel a knot of anxiety in my stomach. In that moment I remembered that I had shared my evening plans with a close friend back home and included my location. I quickly checked in with them via a quick text, and I felt a wave of relief when I saw that they had read the message. Knowing someone was keeping track of my whereabouts made me feel safer, even though I wasn't in immediate danger. Advancements in technology have made staying connected while traveling easier than ever, and I always took advantage of that. While I still made sure to check in with someone I trusted back home, I also used apps that allowed me to track my location and share it in real time. Apps like Find My Friends or Google Maps location sharing let me share my whereabouts with a friend or family member. This simple step made a huge difference in my peace of mind. Traveling with a companion or staying connected with a trusted person back home provides a safety net that allows you to be more confident and self-assured while on the road. These connections create a network of support, whether it's emotionally, logistically, or in case of emergencies. There were times when I found myself in situations that were uncertain or made me feel vulnerable, but having someone by my side, whether physically with me or digitally connected, made all the difference. Through my experiences, I've come to understand that connecting with the local LGBTQ+ community isn't just about seeking a safe space to express myself. It's also about joining a global network of people who share similar values, experiences, and struggles. Every time I meet someone from the LGBTQ+ community in a new place, I am reminded that our connection transcends borders, cultures, and languages. Whether it's bonding over shared experiences, learning about each other's cultures, or supporting each other's rights, these connections are a reminder that no matter where we go, we're never truly alone. Building these relationships has made my travels more meaningful and has helped me grow both personally and politically. Each place I visit, each community I engage with teaches me something new about myself and the world around me. Through these connections, I feel that I am not just traveling as an LGBTQ+ individual, but as a part of a global community that spans continents and cultures, a community united by resilience, hope, and the desire for equality.